All right, welcome everyone to this webinar. Welcome. This is our first webinar that we're offering to provide a deeper discussion on various aspects of estate planning. I'm Susan Fouché, your host. We won't take a lot of your time this evening. We'll present for about 30 minutes and then leave time for questions and answers. During the webinar, please type your comments into the chat section, and then please send your direct questions to the Q&A section at the bottom. And Peter and Brianna will answer towards the end of the webinar as many questions as time allows. Tonight's webinar is focused on estate planning for personal property. And I am going to turn things over to Peter, who will go over tonight's agenda.
Thank you very much. And thanks for everyone who's joined us. This is our first webinar, and really surprised at how many people signed up and registered. So it's really great. This is being recorded. So now that we figured out how to run a webinar, we're going to figure out how to get a video posted on the website, because we've already gotten a couple emails from people who can't make it tonight. And so we'll have it on the website recorded later. The topic that we chose for this webinar is called Estate Planning for Personal Property. And we find that this is an opportunity for a lot of people to incorporate more specific planning measures for items of personal property, your stuff. You know, a lot of our focus is around what's going to happen to real estate, financial accounts, retirement accounts. But I do think that it makes sense for a lot of people to put some time and effort into planning for what do they want to see happen to personal property. So first thing we got to do is make sure that we're very clear about what we're talking about as far as what is tangible personal property, and explain why this fits in as such an important aspect of your overall estate planning. And then we're going to give you some tips on how to incorporate planning for personal property in your existing estate plan. And then I'm also going to give you some thoughts on when maybe you should just give things away. Don't plan on holding on to everything until the very end, but instead there are some things that I think you should consider giving away. You know, in our practice, we work with a lot of people on the planning side, but we also work with a lot of people after their loved ones have passed away. So we see how these plans get implemented, and we see opportunities where things can be streamlined and improved after someone passes away. So starting off first, what exactly are we talking about tonight? What is tangible personal property? And I want to have Brianna Capshaw, my associate attorney here, give you a good overview of what it is we're actually talking about.
Okay, thank you, Peter, and hello to everybody. Okay, so what is tangible personal property? What are we talking about when we say tangible personal property? So what we're talking about is your stuff. So these are going to be items that can be moved or touched, and it does not include your financial accounts. So some examples of tangible personal property are, furniture, jewelry, cars that you own, and not to offend anybody, because I know we like to think of our pets as our family members, but they're actually legally considered personal property. So pets are going to be included in this discussion. Collections, baseball card collections, coin collections, art. Those are all examples of tangible personal property. Tangible personal property is unique because, yes, it can be of great monetary value, but it can also be of great sentimental value as well. Okay, so how planning today can avoid problems tomorrow. So the reason that distribution of tangible personal property is such an important topic is because it's not always as cut and dry as you think it might be. When Peter and I, when we work on probate matters, we tend to see the same problems over and over again. And as estate planning attorneys, we also see how, with just a little bit of planning, a lot of these reoccurring problems could be avoided. One of the phrases we have here that Peter coined are, it's better to be proactive than reactive. Okay, so some of these common problems are, the first one is going to be lack of guidance. So, your personal representative, they're going to be in charge of, when you pass away, they're in charge of figuring out what to do with all of your stuff. So, figuring out what to inventory, what to appraise, what to sell, what to donate. And you really don't want your PR wasting a lot of time and money on appraising something that really isn't worth anything. And then on the other side of this is failure to identify items of value, because it may not be obvious to your PR what's valuable and what's not. And then if you notice on the right hand side of the screen, there's a little story about items that were found in a garbage dump that actually turned out to be Winston Churchill's and turned out to be worth over $13,000. And this is actually just one of many stories I found when I was creating these slides. There's actually a lot of interesting stories out there about people finding something at a garage sale or something they had stuffed away in a closet, they end up being worth a lot of money, sometimes millions of dollars. Not saying that it happens all the time, but you definitely don't want it to happen to you. And I actually think Peter has a good story here.
Yeah, so fortunately, this story wasn't my case. It was a colleague's case, and they were consulting with me because of my tax background, trying to figure out how to deal with the issue from a tax perspective. But the absurd facts were that after the person passed away, they brought in an auction company to come in and auction off the items that appeared to have value in the house that none of the family members wanted. And one of the items that was auctioned off and sold as part of that sale was a vase. And, the personal representative who's in charge of the estate, they hired an auctioneer to help them do this. They thought they were doing the right thing, figuring it out. They sold this vase, I forget the exact numbers, but they sold the vase for about $1,000. And it was just about 2 months later that the exact same vase showed up on Sotheby's national auction, charity auction or whatnot, and was sold for like $3 million. And one of the beneficiaries figured it out that the vase was grossly undersold by the estate. And then they came out and sued the personal representative and said, hey, you had something that was worth $1,000 that you sold for $1,000 that actually was worth $3 million. You should be liable for the difference. That's the nightmare scenario with tangible personal property. So to head that off, if you're the one who bought that vase and know that it has value, you should really put down, and Brandon's going to give you some tips on where to put this down, but you want to alert whoever you've named as personal representative that that item has value. Back when we used to have in-person meetings, I used to always point to that side table, and I used it as an example of, half the people that look at that side table might say, oh, that's a really nice side table. I wonder what that's worth. Other people realize that I bought that at Cardi's for $300, and you should never spend any time appraising that, or, it could probably be thrown away or donated if I didn't need it anymore. So any tips that you can give your personal representative and guidance, alerting them to the high value items that you might have, can be extremely beneficial.
Okay, so next slide.
Okay.
Okay, so another problem that we see is losing the history of the item. Heirlooms are immediately what comes to mind because those are usually items that typically have a story attached to them. For instance, if your father passed down a family heirloom to you, you want to know, who your father received it from, how long it's been in the family, when it came into the family. Those are all stories that can get lost if you pass away before you have the chance to tell your family about them. And, this could lead to your loved ones really losing appreciation for that item and, understanding the monetary and sentimental value with that item. And probably, the biggest and most common problem we see are disputes over how to divide the items. Because a bank account can be divided evenly 7 ways down to the penny, but you really can't do that in the same way with the house full of stuff. And typically these disputes arise when multiple people want the same item. For instance, if you have 4 kids and 1 engagement ring and your kids are left to fight it out, we've seen these issues play out and they can get pretty ugly. Even when a family agrees to play fair and draw straws for an item, there's always a risk that maybe the person who gets it doesn't really appreciate it, while the person who drew the shortest straw is the person who would have appreciated it the most. And just to give you an example, I have a story that comes to mind. When I was in college, I was given the opportunity to go to France with my friends, and I only had about a month's notice before we were leaving on the trip. And I was a poor college student at the time, so I was working like 3 jobs just so I could make enough money to go. And a week before, my grandparents ended up surprising me with the rest of the money I needed to go on my trip. So that was really special to me. And while I was there, I ended up buying them this street painting for like 20 euro. And they actually ended up really loving it. And they ended up spending like a couple $100 getting it framed. And to this day, it's actually still hanging above their bed. And they recently asked me, what it was I wanted when they passed away. Because let me tell you, my family is one of those families who's going to go to war over a spoon. So, they already know that there's going to be issues there, and, they're being proactive instead of reactive. But anyways, they asked me what I wanted, and I said, all I want is that street painting, because even though it's really not worth the frame it's in, it's really special to me, and it has this really great memory of how good they were to me. And I know that no one else in our family is going to cherish it the way that I would. So, bottom line is your property should go to who you want it to go to. Okay, so how do we avoid these common problems we just talked about? And that is going to be through the tangible personal property memo. And I'm actually going to start our first poll. How many of you have actually put together a tangible personal property memo?
So hopefully that showed up on the screen.
It did.
Oh.
I'll give it we've got a lot of votes. Give it a couple more seconds just to get a look. But it looks like about 15% of people have put together a tangible personal property memo, and the majority of people, and this is consistent with what we see, majority of people have not put something like that together.
Okay, great. So good thing is I'll be able to give you some tips today on how to put that together. So when Massachusetts adopted the Uniform Probate Code, it allowed for a will to reference a tangible personal property memo, giving directions to your personal representative to distribute specific items. So a tangible personal property memo, or I'm going to refer to it as a TPP memo, is a signed written statement outlining who receives the items listed. TPP memos are really great because they're easy to change, they're easy to update. You don't need to hire a lawyer to do it, you don't need witnesses, and you don't need a notary. And you don't necessarily need to update your will just because you've updated your TPP memo. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see an example, a super simple example of a TPP memo. You can see it just represents the will, and then it says, to Robin, now of Gotham City, I give my 1989 Batmobile. So that's just a super simple example of one of ours. And then just to let you know, if our office prepared your will, we anticipate that clients may want to reference a tangible personal property memo. So our wills are drafted to include that reference, and you can find it in Article 1. You don't have to use one of our TPP memos, but if you'd like to, just let us know and we can send you a sample one. Okay, so some tips for preparing your TPP memo. So my number one tip for you is be specific. You almost can't be specific enough. So, some examples of sentences that you should avoid are, all items in the family room to my daughter. This is too vague because one, you want to specify exactly, who your daughter is, the name of your daughter. And then, all items in my family room, that can be problematic because what's in your family room might change, during your lifetime. Also, it would be pretty easy to just walk into the family room and take something into another room. And then, daughter doesn't have an argument for why that item was in the family room and why it should go to her. Or my earrings to my granddaughter. Again, you want to specify who the person's going to. And then you also want to, make sure that you give a little bit more of a description to the item. My earrings is going to be pretty big, especially if you have more than one pair of earrings. So instead, use sentences like my 19th century Mason porcelain potpourri vase from Germany to my daughter, Melissa. And that like the vase story that Peter had earlier is probably going to alert to someone, okay, 19th century, Mason porcelain vase, this might be worth something. It's from Germany. Maybe I should get an expert involved. Or my 14K gold small hoop earrings to my granddaughter, Emily. So really be specific. Another tip I have is to utilize photographs. If you have a lot of jewelry, try to take pictures of the item, take a picture of it, print it out, number it, and then you can put it in a binder. That way, when you prepare your TPP memo, you can reference it on the memo, and then it's just crystal clear who it's going to. And then also, partial lists are okay too. If you find that, I know who I want my jewelry to go to, but I really haven't decided who I want my collection to go to, prepare the memo for what you have now. Prepare it, sign it, keep it, print it out, sign it, keep it with your will. And then if anything does happen to you, at least those items are going to be addressed and taken care of. And then also, don't feel the need to catalog your entire house. Focus on items of high monetary and or sentimental value. For instance, and not to offend anybody, but if you bought the item at IKEA, you probably don't need to address it in your TPP memo. Okay, so and then this is a slide I just wanted to give you guys an example of a TPP memo with pictures. And so this one, you can see, the first line, it says my Vermont barn painting labeled as #1 on the attached picture binder. And then the picture on the top right-hand side of the screen, you can see the barn painting. And then there's a #1 in the right-hand corner. So, even if, we weren't sure which, if she had multiple barn paintings, we know that this is the one that's going to Elaine Venice because it says #1. And then you'll see, to Cosmo Kramer, my sunflowers painting label is #6 on the attached picture binder. So there you can see the picture of the sunflowers, the #6 on the left-hand side. And then also you can see, in the left-hand corner, it says, you always loved this. And I just thought that was really great too, because then, not only is the person, they get this painting from you, but then they get this awesome, handwritten note saying, why they're getting it. So I just wanted to be able to give you an example of what, that picture and TPP memo would look like together. But now I am going to go ahead and pass the torch to Peter.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the pictures on the right are real from a client who gave us permission, but the memo on the left, we don't represent Jerry Seinfeld, just to make that clear. So I wanted to go into a couple categories of tangible personal property that routinely come up and give you some ideas on how you might want to address it. So for pets, dogs, cats, I know for a lot of people, they've already worked out with a family member, a neighbor, or someone else, um, that there's a verbal understanding about where that pet's going to go. So it may not be necessary in every estate plan, but if there's any uncertainty, or if you think that actually multiple people are going to be vying for that prize dog, you can put a direction right in the tangible personal property memo as to who's going to receive that dog if you were to pass away. And you can actually include backups too. You know, you could say first to my sister, but if my sister's not able to take it, then to my niece. You know, that's a good way to address it. One thing that we see with pets that, you know, certainly surprised me the first time I saw it, but I think it's a really good idea, is that people will put together a letter of instruction outlining particular aspects of that pet that may not be readily apparent. So I've seen people put together memos that address what the pet's favorite foods are, toys, activities, the name of the vet that treats the pet, so that you can figure out, the person who receives the pet can figure out exactly where to take over as far as medical care, veterinarian care. You know, things like that. The pet can't communicate any of that to you. So I think that makes a lot of sense to put down into instructions. One common thing that we see frequently that you can't do is that the tangible personal property memo can only address tangible personal property. And we frequently see people put down things like, I give my pet and $1,000 to this niece. And that second part where it says I'm giving $1,000, that would not be a valid item to include in a tangible personal property memo. You know, cash is considered an intangible type of property, and that would need to be included in your will. You'd want to amend the will and add in that $1,000 bequest. And I'm not discouraging the giving of money with pet care. I think that that may make sense. You know, I think the number one goal would be, who's the best person to take care of the pet, and then ask yourself, would that person need financial assistance to be able to care for the pet? And we've actually seen some pretty complex considerations. Sometimes people will use formula clauses so that the bequest starts off large when the pet is young, and over time the amount of money going to that person decreases as the pet gets older. Kind of a side note, but we get a lot of questions about this, so I thought I'd just mention it. There are, in Massachusetts now, we recognize something called a pet trust. And what that is, it's a way to control financial assets that you want to leave for the benefit of your pet. And I think one of the big things that it addresses is the fact that, you know, if you do give $10,000 to your niece, and 2 years later the niece passes away or decides that they can't keep the pet anymore, that $10,000 is probably gone too. Whereas if you set up a trust for the benefit of that pet, the money would actually stay inside that trust. It would be used just for the pet's benefit. You know, if the niece went through a divorce, a car crash, a bankruptcy, that money is not sitting in their pocket. It's not legally theirs. It belongs to the pet to some degree. And we find that pet trusts are usually implemented on larger bequests. Like, we had a family who might have had, I think they had like 15 or 20 dogs, and they wanted to leave a substantial amount of money to make sure that those dogs were going to be cared for. That's a great use of a pet trust. The last pet trust I set up was for a horse. I don't know anything about horses, but apparently they are very expensive and they can live for a long time. So this owner wanted to make sure that if she passed away, that horse was cared for and was able to live out its life in the manner that she wanted it to. in addition to pets, there's issues with firearms too that crop up here and there. So the issue with firearms is that most of them would require at least licensing at the state level by the recipient, and there are some out there that require a federal licensing as well. So when you are putting together your tangible personal property memo, if that memo includes firearms, when you're designating who that firearm should go to, you really should be asking yourself, does that person have, in Massachusetts, does that person have a license to carry? Because if they're not licensed to receive that weapon, there's going to be a problem there. And then I also think it's really important that you let the people know who you're designating in charge of your estate the fact that you've got these weapons. One, there's just a value issue, making sure that any paperwork that you've got, they can get access to make sure that they know what weapons might be very valuable. Weapons need to be stored in a safe locked container. So you're going to want to leave some instructions on how to access that. And just, this seems basic, but let the person know who's administering the estate that there's special restrictions on these. We've actually had a widow show up at our office in connection with her husband's estate, going through the initial probate process and figuring out what needs to be done. And she brought the firearms with her. They stayed in the car. She didn't bring them into the office, but she brought them with her, and she doesn't have a license to carry. She didn't know that she was technically committing a criminal offense when she did that. I don't think any police officer would have arrested her, but that gun owner should have warned her, leave those guns in the safe, call this gun shop, they'll come out, they'll secure them, they'll take them. Just a little instruction like that can go a long way. So the last big topic is just around when should you consider actually giving away some of these items that we've been talking about tonight. And I think that one of the first reasons that you should think about would be if something's got a good story with it, that you want to make sure that that story gets passed down to the recipient of the property. Whether it's a family Bible or, piece of furniture, grandfather clock. Those are all times when, if you can make the transfer during your lifetime, you can be sure that you can tell the person the significance of that item as you're making the transfer. I think that's a really important thing to consider, and get rid of the story and the item at the same time. There's also a taxes/tax compliance reason that I think is legitimate and that people should think about. Here in Massachusetts, we have a really low threshold for the estate tax. At the federal level right now, an individual would have to have more than $11.5 million before you have to worry about a federal estate tax. Whereas Massachusetts, we've had the same $1 million filing threshold for the last 20 years. And when you put together an estate tax return, you have to appraise certain items of tangible personal property if they could increase the value of the estate. So one of the last ones I worked on, it was a coin collection. The individual passed away and they had a coin collection, and we knew that it was valuable. And so we had to hunt down somebody who could appraise the coins. The person wouldn't come out to the house, so we had to transport all the coins to the appraiser. And I think the appraisal fees were $1,000 or $2,000 to go through everything. So there was a huge cost just to be in compliance with the tax code. And if instead that person had given away those items during their lifetime, they probably wouldn't have had to deal with that. You know, right now, our annual gift tax exclusion is $15,000 per person per donee. So if I'm looking at a baseball card collection on my shelf and I'm saying, you know, it's probably $5, $6, $7,000 worth of baseball cards, you can just give that away during lifetime. And that way, when you pass away, your personal representative doesn't have to worry about spending time and effort getting an appraisal, figuring out all those different things. Another item to give away would be the high demand items. If you've got 6 kids and they have all verbally told you that they want the Christmas china, listen to what they're saying. That's an issue that you should address. Don't let the 6 of them get into a fight over who's going to get the Christmas china. You know, as you think about it, you might have a good idea of what are the hot ticket items that have a ton of sentimental value that people might disagree about. And you want to frame it so that you're the one making the decision. The parent is making the decision. And as a result, you know, you're not going to make all your children happy if one gets the Christmas china and the others don't. But even if they have any anger, it's going to be directed at the parent. You know, you don't want that anger directed at siblings and say, oh, you know, my sister took advantage of me and she got all the good stuff. You want that person to realize that it was the parent making the decision, not the sibling. And that's going to, you know, in this case, lead to harmonious Christmas family dinners in the future if your kids aren't angry over how things were divided because they know that you were the one who made the decision, not their sibling. Another category of items that should be given away, and this may apply to people in the meeting. I'm looking at the attending list. There's some people out there with some really nice collector cars sitting in garages. There was one in Weymouth that was actually a small airplane in the garage. If you haven't used an item like that in 5, 6, 7 years, you should start to think about giving it away, even if it is your baby, because an item like that is just, you know, granted, overall, they're probably appreciating in value these days, but think of all the fluids and the belts and the pieces of rubber in that vehicle that are slowly degrading from lack of use. You know, if you can give that item away during lifetime, it's going to lead to a better quality item in the hands of the person that you want it to. And then lastly, we unfortunately have a term for this too. We call it probate by U-Haul. And this is when, you know, the majority of the family is grieving your loss. There is that one family member that enters your house and takes that item that multiple people want. And that is called probate by U-Haul. That's not a statutory term. That is something that we've come up with over the years, because unfortunately we see it frequently, or at least we hear accusations of it frequently, because you know, unless your video door cam is in the right spot, there's not a whole lot of evidence to document that someone has come into your house and taken something of value while the rest of your family is literally at the funeral home attending services. And it's tough for us because we get the phone call where, you know, someone says, you know, the Christmas china is gone. We know it was there before the person passed away and now it's gone. These were the people not at the funeral. You know, that's just circumstantial evidence and there's not a lot for us to do at that point. So if you've got that family member that you don't have a lot of faith and trust in, and you know that there are items that multiple people want, that would be another great reason to give it away during lifetime. You know, that is the greatest way to guarantee that that item that means a lot to you is landing in the hands of the person that you want to see it in. I think that's it. Yeah, that's our presentation. And while we've got some questions coming in. Oh, and while I've got everybody's attention still, I just want to run two more quick polls. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is our first webinar, and we'd like to keep putting these on. There's a ton of registration and interest in this webinar, so if people find these valuable, we'd like to keep doing them. So what I'll do is I've got a poll that just launched on the screen about topics that we thought might be of interest in the future. And so if you could give us some quick feedback and click on the topics that you think are valuable to you, that will give us some sense, and we'll use this feedback. We're tentatively thinking that our next webinar is going to be in October, but we'll send out an email so that everybody's aware of it. And if I think there are people who didn't receive the email, who might have been forwarded the email from friends or family members. If you go to our website, there's a spot right on the website where you can sign up for a newsletter. And if you're subscribed to the newsletter, you'll get the webinar invite as well. Excellent. So yeah, the big hot topics appear to be, I'll give this a couple more seconds, but big topics appear to be Massachusetts estate tax. You know, that is something that people ask about a lot, and I find that people are always surprised what gets drawn into that estate tax, because for most people, when I say estate tax, if that registers at all to you, you're thinking about that $11 million threshold at the federal level, and not the $1 million threshold that we have here in Massachusetts. So that's a big topic. And then this was Brianna's suggestion, was how to avoid probate. You know, that is a common question that we get. So I think that will be another great topic as well. Excellent. So thank you for that. And then just one more quick poll would be, want to just get a sense of what time of day do these webinars work best for you? We chose 6:30 because we were trying to think of when people might get home from work and before you're start to have to put kids to bed and go to bed. But we know a lot of times people will do lunchtime seminars as well. But we may have chosen the right time based on the initial poll results.
Or the people who could make it are the one polling.
What's that?
Or the people who were able to make it today because it worked for them are the ones.
Ah, true. You just pointed out the if I asked people this in the morning, they'd all say morning works well, but I'm asking people at 6:30. Yeah, there's probably a bias there. Excellent. Well, at least we got some idea of what that this was a good time for most people. So that's great. Susan, I'm not sure if I'm even looking at the right question, but the right window, but did you have any questions that came in?
I do. I've got 3 questions that have come in. Let me pull those up really, really fast to get the right window open. This one is actually kind of a long one, and it says, I have a baseball card collection that might actually be worth 10 to 15,000, but I don't have a formal appraisal. Everyone in the family knows my son gets that collection. It's a joint hobby of his and mine. Do I need to appraise that and get a value just so I can make sure my daughter gets a financially equal item of value?
Susan, can we start with an easy question? No, I'm just kidding.
Sure.
So that is a tough question. And I think that one of the tough aspects of that is just this concept that fair and equal don't always have to coincide in estate planning. You know, I know we often think about leaving everything precisely equal to children, but in this question, I think they said that it was a joint hobby.
Yes.
It was obviously something the two of them did. That daughter might not even care that that item is going to that son. But what I would suggest is that I think the parent in that case might want to actually talk to the daughter and let them know what's going on. Because if the son gets that item and the daughter thinks that it's worth even more than what's estimated, or maybe you could have a card collection increase dramatically in value over time. You don't want the daughter surprised by that. And when she finds out about that, the perfect reaction for her is, oh yeah, that's what dad told me. I remember that. Obviously that goes to my brother. I was never expecting that. That's the perfect result. That's kind of what you should be trying to achieve. And don't think that necessarily because you gave somebody something worth $10,000 that you absolutely have to give someone else precisely the same amount. Maybe if you're in a family of accountants, maybe that is the result, but don't think that you're bound by that. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Next question is, I've been trying to give away a collector car to my son for a long time, but he doesn't have the storage space for it. What should I do if I want to give it, but the recipient doesn't seem to want to take it?
Does it say the year, make, and model? Because maybe I'll take it.
No.
Especially if you're paying for storage and everything, it's an ongoing cost. So I could see why you want to give it away. I think that perhaps suggesting that maybe a time frame is involved, and just say, listen, I want you to have this car, but my lease is up for the storage space in September. And if you can't take it, I do need to sell it at that point because I can't continue storing it ad infinitum. That might be a way to get it going and to motivate them. And maybe you just start giving them the storage bill every month and say, here you go, you can take this over, and here's the bill of sale. There's probably some different ways to go about approaching that, but collector car, I'm with you on the idea that let's get rid of that item because if it's not being used, it's just losing value most likely.
Okay, thank you. There's another question. What about drawing lots or short straws? I've heard people do that sort of thing when going through a house full of items.
Brianna, actually, didn't you have that issue pop up recently?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that there can just be an issue there. Maybe it would work with some items, but like I kind of touched on earlier, if there's something that one kid is going to appreciate more than any of the other kids, and you draw straws, and then somebody gets it who really doesn't appreciate it, isn't really gonna hold on to it, might not pass it on in the family, and then the person who drew the shortest straw, is the person who would have appreciated, who wants to keep it in the family. That's kind of similar to my France painting story. Anybody else in my family isn't going to appreciate that little painting that really isn't worth very much. The frame is definitely worth a lot more than it is. But it's something that I really want, and I think I would be really sad if I had to draw a straw and that wasn't something I got, because nobody else is going to appreciate it like I would. So maybe why that would work with other things that maybe don't have monetary and sentimental value, I don't think it's always the greatest option for high ticket items or things that have stories attached to them.
Yeah, I think using straws is a way to use luck or chance to divide things, and the goal here is really fulfilling your intentions and making sure that the items that you have recognized have value to you go to people that similar value them. Um, I think it was in the state a while ago, but I remember somebody, they did that where they drew straws and they rotated through who got what. And one of the people was particularly upset that an item that they really wanted went to a sibling, and then they found out the sibling sold the item. And they would have bought it, but they didn't even know that the sibling did that until they found out after the sale. So that's the whole goal here, figuring out where should those items go, put your intentions down in a tangible personal property memo, and don't rely on straws or luck to distribute these items. Susan, is that all the questions that were asked?
That is all the questions that I am seeing. So I am going to say thank you again for attending this evening. This video, like Peter said, will be available on the website for your future viewing, and the next webinar will be announced on email, so keep an eye out for that. And please feel free to forward the webinar announcements to any of your friends or family that you think would be interested. Have a wonderful night. Thank you all so much for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.